my first question for you is, what does your art mean to you?
Well, I think it's kind of it's been my whole life. Even as a child, I've been doing art and creating things and making things. And I also feel like art is what I do, but also I get inspiration from movies, music, dance, theater, poetry, writing. I just feel like it's my existence, and it's something that I put my energy into finding and doing. For me, it means, for me personally, it means a freedom of expression that I can't find anywhere else, and an intimacy within myself to have a private place to go to make work. So that's a real important part of the art, what art does for me.
Next question for you is, how did you begin making art, and who are some inspirations of yours?
Oh boy, I always say that I feel like art found me. When I was a child, about 3 years old, we used to go to this thrift store, and at this thrift store, they had the book department next to the toy department. So, that would always be the first place at the thrift store I would go, and I found a poster book with an image of Henry Rousseau's one of his images of a woman in the recline with the lion and the moon, and it was like a jungle, and she's lying next to the lion. And when I saw that image, it was like something I had never seen in my whole entire life, and it just kind of like just shifted something in me, like intrigued me so much. So from that on, that even though I couldn't read, the visuals were so great that every time we go to that thrift store, I'd pick up an art book with images and buy them. They were like 25 cents, and so that started. And also just it was something that I always did. I guess it was because it was a good way to keep myself busy, um, and uh, and that I had toys, but not very many. So I would like take junk mail and staple them into books and draw on them and do things like that. And I always liked, as you can see in the exhibit, I like collage. So I would make flour and water paste myself and um, and put things together. And it was like a really good escapism for me to be able to use my imagination. And I've always been that way. It's just, I guess it sounds like a cliche, but it was just something I was born with. And for inspiration, like I said, I get inspiration from music, poetry, theater, literature, um, and I do a lot of research. So when I research a certain topic, uh, I'll find inspiration inside myself. What inspires me on the artist spectrum is not so much the artwork of artists that they do, but their emotional and psychological strength that I see in some of the abstract expressionist artists and people like Frida Kahlo, and how their painting is very important, but their spirit to keep on going is really what really gives me the inspiration to keep on going, because sometimes, the art world can feel very isolated, or you wonder, if am I doing the right thing? But when you hear about these people struggling in their work, and like the abstract expressionists, um, you feel like, if they can do it, I can do it. It's okay to do the work. And another inspiration for me is a woman by the name of Jane Tannenbaum, who she was a modern dancer for Martha Graham, and I had the opportunity to work with her because I have an extensive modern dance background before I started painting, and she was my teacher and mentor when I was about 16 till I was about 20, and she was in her 70s at the time, and she was just somebody that really just kind of pushed me forward to keep on doing what I wanted to do artistically. So those are some of the inspirational points of my life of people and artists.
What are some main subjects that you address in your work?
Well, main subjects it's kind of separated, and main subjects in my photography is always everyday people. I like capturing people in their everyday environment, because I feel like that's what we are, and our total existence and our spirit is in what we do every day on a daily basis. I like to photograph anywhere I go, just to see people in their everyday lives, and I also like to photograph indigenous cultures when I can, and that's always been kind of a passion for me. In my paintings, I do mixed media, So I always sometimes do homages to people. I don't know where it comes from, but I've always liked doing homages. As in this exhibit, there's a homage to Camille Claudel, to Chet, to Alfredo, excuse me, Antonio Mello in the back, and the Tina Madati. And so I try to do homages to people that I like, that I think are important people in my life and did important work. Politics can play a subject, but sometimes that gets really depressing. There was one point in life when I was one of the Art Not members when I first started, and it was always on political issues, and I finally had to stop because it got too heavy and I needed to take a break mentally from it. But I seem to be striving towards social issues all the time, be it water issues, environmental issues, nature issues, human rights issues, things like that play a big part in my work.
How do your life experiences influence the work that you do?
Well, like I said, I would have never. It was funny when I met Jane Tannenbaum. I had just got diagnosed with scoliosis in my spine, and I had been doing all these treatments, and none of them worked. And by happenstance, I saw a sign in that there were. She was going to be giving dance classes, the Martha Graham technique, which is basically based on the spinal cord, at the YWCA for like, I don't know, 25 a month for 2 classes a week. And so when I went in there, she, basically cured my spine, and that really made a big difference in, where I was going with my artwork, and kind of just rocketed off from there.
As a professional artist who is also a woman of color, do you feel that it is more challenging to exhibit your work? If so, what are those challenges?
This is the thing. I've always considered myself to be a woman of color, a woman, and an artist. Not so much in that order, but 3 minorities in a sense. Being a woman of color, it gets challenging to get into exhibits that are not ethnic in a sense, of all Latino exhibit, or so that's kind of been a challenge. But I think now it's gotten a little easier, because you can do call for artists and you can apply to get into the exhibits. It can be sometimes challenging in the sense that you have to really make sure that you look after yourself, you're aggressive and persistent in where you want to exhibit and where you want to be and what you want to do, and really promote yourself. That's the biggest challenge, is always trying to promote myself to get into a broader base of where I exhibit my work. That's been going pretty good, actually, so that's not too bad. But being a female, well, it's, I think I'm okay on that point. I think sometimes some curators still want to go for the big names and sometimes forget about the up and coming artists who are doing their work, who are equally as good and equally as talented. And I feel like sometimes those artists can be promoted more, so that there's a big difference of just always having the mainstreamers always exhibiting, and nurturing the newcomers and young people to be able to exhibit in the same right as established artists.
What is it that you hope that people take away from your collection of work?
Well, I always think about one statement that Rauschenberg made. And Rauschenberg said once that, I may be taken out of content, but he also said, if you produce artwork and you get a reaction, whether it's good or bad, you've done your job. And I think that's kind of true. I like the viewer to come. I'd like the viewer to make their own decision about my work. I like the viewer to be able to look at the work and experience it themselves. Hopefully it's a good thing. I like for them to be able to have a dialogue with my piece before they see my artistic statement, before they meet me, just to have a free will of mind to make their own decisions of what they feel about the work. Sometimes it gets a little complex because, I use different techniques: the printmaking, the photography, the etching, the collaging, and the painting can be a little overwhelming because it's so many different mediums. But I just hope that my work just helps people to understand something differently, or just enjoy it, or not enjoy it. But like I said, it's good to have both reactions and feedback, I think.
Are there any particular pieces that stand out from this particular collection?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize this is the first exhibit I've ever had where I have all my mediums showing together. They're usually just one medium and not, but there's a mixture of mediums here. So that makes me really excited because I have some of my solar etchings and the hand-colored etchings, and I have some collages, and I have some paintings, and I have photography. So that's really exciting. I'm really particularly happy about the Cuban pieces right now. That trip happened in 2017. I used my 35 millimeter that I've had since high school for that trip, and so I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to go to Cuba, to meet the Cuban people, to see Havana, and to go to Ernest Hemingway's house. That's a museum called Finca Bahia, and also just the fact that when we went, it was easy, and then when we got back, that same way we got back, Trump limited and closed the doors to go to Cuba, which is really too bad. I think Cuba and the Cuban people are misunderstood, and a lot of myths about Cuba that once you go there, you realize how wonderful the people are and how resourceful they are. So that work for me is really important because I've documented Cuba, and I have it personally in my own collection. I also have more images than what are here of Cuba, and that is for me very important, that I can leave to my son the photos of Cuba, and hopefully one day we can all go as a family. So I'm hoping, like you asked about what the viewer can take, I'm hoping that when the people see the photography of Cuba, that it'll give them a humanistic compelling feeling that, you know, the Cubans are like all of us, that are just trying to make a living, trying to survive, and trying to be happy as they can be, and they're very happy people. So that the Cuban collection is really, I'm really proud of right now.
Okay, final question. What is the best thing about being an artist?
Well, the best thing about being an artist is what I had said. I've always been kind of a recluse and kind of a solitary type of young female growing up. You know, when I was taking art and art classes and dance classes, it was such an intimate thing. What I like about being an artist is the freedom to be able to create, to have, to express myself. It's a freedom that I don't think I could get any other way. The best thing about being an artist too is just opportunities that come up, like this one here, to have this exhibit and to have this interview for their archives for Regis University. Other opportunities that come up are really nice. A good example is I will be working with NARAL in Golden, and where I'm going to be working with some scientists and some researchers based on energy and the future of energy. And we're going to be working together in a workshop where they will be giving me information and allowing me to create some artwork that they're going to publish in their book that they're putting together about the environment. So little things like that happen in an artistic career that are really fun, that can happen. And also just the opportunity I get to exhibit my work at other places and travel. That's the good part, you know, and the framing part isn't. You know, my husband has to do all that. But I like the freedom I feel that I cannot get just because I can create. I can open up a spectrum of freedom that I don't feel I could get anywhere else. I'm sure many artists feel like that, be it scientists, be it writers, poets, dancers, directors, theater people, actors. It's just an element of being able to just escape the world, I guess, the real world, for an example, to be able to just intimately go into yourself, to try to create something that's coming out of yourself is really nice. And to be able to, it's also therapy. I've had a lot of situations where healing has come as part of my creative process. Day of the Dead was a good example of that. And when we did some research, again, another great thing is we did some research for the first AIDS exhibit that ever happened in Denver by Dr. George Rivera. He's in CU, and he had some artists go to Mexico, and we researched the AIDS epidemic and put a catalog and did some artwork based on that. So I always, you know, I feel firmly that humanities are extremely important in our world because it's the humanities that make us more human. And when the humanities work with the sciences, you just get a better humanity, I think. And those things like that, I think, come from what makes it great to be an artist. to be, and the other great part about it is you really don't have to retire. I mean, you can be an artist all your life unless, you know, you have physical challenges as we get along or go along. Like Monet, you know, he painted until his 80s, and even though he was almost blind, he still painted. So it's like you don't have to have worry about when you can having to stop. You can keep on going, and as the older I get right now, the more creative I get, which is nice. More creative, I feel like I'm more creative now than when I was a younger artist. I can relax now, take a deep breath, and just create what I want to create, and that feels good. So those are things, and I love looking at other art mediums, meeting actors, and looking at plays. There's only two things that make me cry, really. It's looking at a really wonderful piece and theater. I don't know, every time I go to the theater, I always get a tear in the eye that this theater, that's something to me. So all the other art disciplines really are really great because I really feel like I can understand them and have a dialogue with them because I am an artist.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you to Regis University for this exhibit in Dayton Memorial Library. I'd like to thank the Regis Art Department, and I'd like to thank Dave and Sean for the media department for making possibilities happen like this. Archiving interviews with artists is so important for people to be able to access to, for the public, for the students, and it's very admirable.